Turns out Apple is slowing down your old iPhone as the battery ages. Facing a class action lawsuit, how should Cupertino respond? Magic Leap is jumping into the augmented reality space with some new goggles, and the Pocketnow staff playing a silly Secret Santa round with our favorite smartphones of the year. We've got a lot to talk about, so make sure you're charged and ready for episode 284 of the Pocketnow Weekly. Recorded December 22nd at noon Pacific, this weekly podcast is where we dissect and discuss those gadgets that make our lives mobile. Smartphones, tablets, and wearables. It's all the stuff you wished existed when you were a kid, and the beginning of your holiday break was filled with limitless possibilities. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, senior editor at Pocketnow.com, joined as always by plucky podcast producer Mr. Jules Wong out on the East Coast. How's it going, buddy boy?
You can sled down that hill or toboggan down that hill, or I don't know. I mean, it was a nice time back when I had a little sled. It
was when my dad was stationed in Massachusetts. It was my all-time favorite. There was this one hill on what was it? Was it Hanscom Air Force Base?
Hanscom Air Force, yeah.
Yeah, that there's this one hill that was amazing for sledding, and the entire base kids, we would all go and like practically break limbs and snap spines sliding down.
Well, out towards Concord, I mean, that's a picturesque town itself. It's pretty neat. It's lovely. You get the crisp feeling in the air.
And there's something like dastardly that happens with snowfall in Massachusetts. I'm sure on a lot of East Coast borders, but like every winter we would get this amazing mixture of like it getting just warm enough during the day to melt. So you'd get this like ice snow layer that was phenomenal for injuring yourself, but then also for, you know,
I mean, it's
whipping
like the
yourself down a
crappiest
hill
of
as fast
mud
as
pies, really. It's just the winter thing. And then sooner or later, the snow turns brown. You have to walk through it, trudge through it in the streets. You're down.
Everything's covered in salt.
It's just not really. Yeah.
It's super great.
Dogs don't eat the salt.
I do kind of miss seasons, but that's the thing that's also really nice about having my home in Albuquerque. It's like you get the mildest version of every season. So like snow falls in New Mexico and there's just not enough moisture. So it's like this really nice dusting, this light misting of snow over everything. And then the next day it's gone.
You have to drive to your seasons. You have to drive.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. Let me tell you, Southern California, it got down to like, I think it's currently like just under 70 degrees. So it's akin to freezing here.
One of those weird benchmarks for weather down there. That's weird. Well, anyways, we're glad that you have decided to join us here for our journey, our audio journey, our video journeys to some extent on this week's podcast, and we invite you to talk with us, get the conversation going, especially as we get towards some of the more controversial topics here. Go onto Twitter and type in the hashtag PNWeekly, and you'll be able to follow the conversation as well as contribute your own comments. We'll be able to read them, respond to them live on the air at 3 p.m. Eastern on this 22nd of December. Yeah. To that Christmas thing going on in a few days. Anyways, if you want to send something along we're still doing that. Technically next week is still the last
oh yeah, no, next week is going to be our mailbag issue. Our mailbag broadcast. We've got
the Pocketnow magazine
that we're gonna chew through. I'm already on vacation brain, so this is gonna be a fun show. I can feel it already.
Oh yeah, definitely. Podcast at Pocketnow.com if you want to throw in a letter into that bag. But in the meantime, it's PN Weekly hashtag on Twitter.
And already on the PN Weekly hashtag, this is from Hey is for David. Last week we were talking a little bit about different AI in sort of home automation products. And Hey is for David writes, I believe the AI showcased in the Samsung washing machine is Cortana, and that was debuted at IFA with the launch of the Galaxy Tab Pro S. I had to look it up. It was called Q-Rater. And so it wasn't Bixby like we were stumbling around last week when we had TK Bay on the show. Samsung's different AI for their washing machines is Q-Rater. So you can get a Samsung washing machine that knows more about your clothes than you do. Has all the dirt on your dirty clothes.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Laura Croft is going to come in and do that, but hey, There you go.
It does. It sounds like a an AI gone rogue, right? Curator, and then it takes over, your mission base and won't let you out of the airlock, and it won't open the pod bay doors, and it's super
Basically, it
sad.
just locks all your laundry in a tomb, and you have to find a way to get to it. You have to raid
I
it.
am ready to greenlight that movie, Jules. I think
All
that
right.
needs to be seen by more than the people who just watch or listen to our podcast.
I'm ready to greenlight the news if you're ready
Yes,
to allow me to
let's
do
do it.
that. So,
We got some fun stories to talk about. This was actually a pretty decent news week.
oh wow, what you got? What you drinking over there?
Oh,
I'm
nothing fancy.
sorry.
It's a diet A&W. They don't
Oh,
sponsor our
okay.
podcast,
I
so
thought you were
I was
having
keeping the ingredients
some
label on
alcohol.
the side.
Mm.
Not
Well,
yet. I'm not there
anyways.
yet. Give it a couple days. The Rugrats on Christmas break, and maybe I'll need something to numb for next week. But she's doing okay right now.
All right. Well, for the week of December 18, 2017, this is all the news that's fit podcast. We'll start off this roundup with some news about the iPhones of the future of 2019. Apple has historically never overindulged in providing big batteries for its devices, and some might argue that it doesn't have to because the iPhone's very power efficient. We'll get to that in just a second, but new projections out from KGI Securities claim that we should expect to see an upgrade in 3D sensing and AR related functions. That sort of equipment, excuse me, will likely tax the power cells more. And we could see to compensate the year after next. Now, there's another argument about Apple and batteries growing up. The company has admitted to slowing down older iPhones like the 6S and 7 after third-party testing showed performance throttling. It stated to TechCrunch that the iOS 11 update brought stricter processing limits to the iPhone 6 and iPhone SE as well, iOS 11.2, that is, to prolong the life of the devices as the lithium-ion batteries start to age. That these claims about the devices having the potential to hit performance peaks that they could not handle, well, they could cause shutdowns and deterioration. There is some nuance to be had here, and we'll get to that as we go into detail with this. Magic Leap has finally published one headsality app, and software kits will be made available in addition to the so-called lightwear goggles, and objects are detected using light field sensors. The product will be available in limited quantities next year. Sony is supposedly producing a new flagship with Qualcomm's latest high-power chipset, the Snapdragon 845. It got a run on Geekbench and pulled numbers as we haven't seen before from any Qualcomm chipset. 2,400 points on a single core test, and 8,300 points for the performance cores, as we like to say, which can run up to 2.6
Is that
gigahertz.
what we like to say? The performance cores.
Course. The 3GPP, meanwhile, third generation partnership or something, has reached its expedited goal of creating the first standard for 5G networks this week, while more rules will be placed in June next year. This paves the way for networks to launch 5G service in late 2018 and afterwards. President Donald Trump has just signed a tax reform bill into law after much wrangling between Republican-controlled House and Senate. Now, what does this have to do with mobile technology? Well, corporations will see their rate drop from 35% to 21%, and big telecoms like at&t and Comcast are celebrating by announcing new expanded capital expenditure plans. Each company is also giving out $1,000 holiday bonuses to all of their non-executive employees. Altogether, around 400,000 working in their ranks. Amazon Tube is one of the latest terms to show up at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Amazon Indeed is the applicant for that term, hinting at everything you can think of for a user-submitted video master distribution platform. It's seen as the latest salvo to Google's unwillingness to bring YouTube back to the Echo Show and to keep it on for Fire TV users. This controversy stems back to some retaliation for Amazon not stocking some of Google's hardware peripherals. Finally, Microsoft has killed off an application in its Windows Store. Now, why would it want to kill off Google Chrome? Doesn't everyone want a lightweight version of this resource hog of a web browser? Well, it turns out that the app that egged users to download the full program, and that didn't set at all well with Microsoft. It would also not make any sense at all for Google to create a firmware Chrome. Microsoft requires JavaScript and HTML for web rendering.
That's easy for you to say
in its apps. While Google uses its own Blink engine, there are a whole bunch of things that go into developing Windows apps for Windows 10s, lightweight thing. We'll get to that as we come to it, but in the meantime, let's talk about the batteries. Let's talk about iPhones that just can't seem to keep their charge, that will require more charge in the future. What does this look to you to shape the future of how Apple describes all day battery life or something like that?
Yeah, it's because this kind of goes hand in hand. What was it, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, where we were talking about Samsung and their graphene. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't drink diet root beer while I'm trying to podcast because I'm gonna have like gurgle burps all show.
I got the polar right here.
Right. No, this kind of goes hand in hand with that. Whenever we see what I think is hilarious is whenever we do see improvements to battery technology. I did a video on this like 3 years before I joined the Pocketnow team. It's the fallacy of bigger batteries or more improved batteries are going to deliver longer runtime. It's almost always immediately eaten up by more powerful processing, more resource intensive apps. And we are right at the precipice of that next generation of services, especially if we're going to be doing more VR and AR like Apple's talking about. Improving the battery capacity or improving the battery runtime or the battery technology is really only going to serve more weighty use, and what I think is hilarious is like you give someone so like let's say you have a current gen phone and you go from having like a 2000 milliamp hour battery to a 4000 milliamp hour battery. What I find are like people don't last twice as long. They just use their phone twice as much during the day. Right. So even the consumer behavior
just
very
quickly capacity.
It very quickly adopts
life. It's just
yeah, I mean, like Jules is on point there because he's sort of locked up and frozen.
Yeah. Anyways,
I agree, Jules.
I agree. Anyways, the phone.
That's someone's trying to call. This is the best live show ever. So like Apple's points here, especially like trying to anticipate what this use might look like in 2019, I think also stands as a small commentary in like what do we expect the longevity of our phones to be? Someone rocking an iPhone 7. Yeah, they used to have a pretty good sense of what their phone of what an iPhone, how long an iPhone should or would last. And this kind of leads us right into the other story too about Apple now admitting that they reduce performance based on the battery age, battery degradation, and battery longevity. And we have a big problem when it comes to things like disclosure. I think that's really almost always a company's biggest fault is instead of getting out ahead of the story, instead of once inklings of this commentary are starting to make it through larger publications, Apple waited until there was like a mountain of evidence against them, and then it makes them look like they're withholding it, like because they are withholding a certain aspect of the performance of this phone when they've always sort of insinuated that this wasn't something that they were doing, that it was just sort of a psychosomatic response to newer software being run on older phones, when in reality they were actually changing up the performance of the device. And so had this just been disclosed, or had consumers been given an option, like, hey, your battery will last less, but you can have the full performance of the phone and just flick the switch, I don't think there'd be an issue here. I don't think there would have been a problem. But now we're talking about $1,000 phones. We're talking about top tier performance. We're talking about the next generation of services. And Apple needs to be disclosing what it is that people are actually doing with, or what's actually happening with the investment that people make in their products.
Well, it's also about how much information they want to give and not to feed into the whole planned obsolescence narrative that people tend to have about these things. But I think TechCrunch, which was the one that makes a good point here, and how customers react to this, where they want to, I don't know, just have a set time for a battery replacement for their iPhone, or something that might not be necessary for the sake of just knowing that performance is going to be maxed out or something like that, where I'm not sure if iOS goes into the nitty gritty and is able to read into metadata about the battery, how
Yeah.
old it is, and whatnot. So there's a lot of implied, there's a lot of ways that people will think around the situation and they'll take action upon it. It might be ill advised in the end. It might not get them more
Well, but
mileage out
again,
of their iPhone.
it's just a situation where I don't think consumers can even come up with an ill-advised response to this if they don't have the information that they should. I think that there is something scummy about a business practice where the performance of a product is degraded over time, and one way to recover that performance would be to install a very cost-effective new battery as opposed to buying a new phone. And these things tend to roll around 2-year cycles where Apple will finally disclose what the problems of a phone were. We saw this with the iPhone 5. The iPhone 5 had battery problems, and Apple didn't really jump into the discussion or offer consumers who were facing those problems any outlet until they were right towards the end of the 2-year life cycle of that phone. And wouldn't you know it, well, instead of getting a new battery for your iPhone 5, you could just buy a new iPhone 6 on a contract or through some sort of payment plan, or you just refresh that way. Wouldn't that just be easier than doing maintenance on an older phone? And
Why
even down to
not
1-year
design
product.
a better chipset that doesn't perform at that level if it has to? Why doesn't
I
it want to just freaking treat its batteries better? Like, there's
Well, but even just giving consumers the choice. I think there are a number of consumers out there that will understand and they'll opt for degraded performance for longer runtime. Like, the phone runs well enough for me to do my emailing and my Twittering. What do I need all this horsepower for? And then there are going to be some consumers who choose, I would rather have the full force of this processor, even though I know I'm going to have to charge it up sooner. But it's a bad look for this company when people could recover their performance by getting, by paying for what? I don't even know how much a battery replacement on an iPhone costs through the Apple
well, I mean, we're
Store, but
talking about everything since the 6, so including the 6, your beloved SE, which is going to
yeah,
be
totally.
kind of slow down. So, I mean, it's just, I mean, the 2-year limit, I mean, should we really commend Apple for going a little bit early on the others?
You broke up in the middle of that, so I have no idea what you were trying to ask there, Jules.
Should we
Sorry.
even commend? Should we even try to commend Apple for going a little bit early on the newer products as well? I mean, it's just,
Well,
yeah, they disclosed it at least.
I don't think it's even like, can we say good boy or bad boy Apple? It's how do we expect this company to do business in the market, and how do we expect this company to treat their customers, especially as there is no competition for Apple. There is no other place you can buy an iPhone. You buy an iPhone from Apple. They have a monopoly on the iPhone market, if we want to look at it that way. And not disclosing this to their consumers, I feel, is a disservice to their own market. And this is also why I used to be so in favor of replaceable batteries on Android phones. It wasn't that I would buy extra batteries to swap during the day. It would be around a year, just as the battery is starting to degrade a little, I would put in a fresh new battery, and then I'd have a backup battery if I ever really needed it. But it was like I got that full charge, that full new phone feel all over again by swapping in a new battery. And now we can't really do that. We can't do that easily. All of these products are now becoming glued shut. So Apple, they've always been on that train, but there could have been a discussion with their customers. Hey, you're getting the new version of the iOS operating system, and your phone battery is 2 years old. For $100, you can refresh the performance of that phone and get new battery life and recover the actual CPU processing, GPU processing of this phone. But they're not going to say that because they want you to go out and buy the new iPhone.
Exactly. And it could be just for that sake too, that the iOS doesn't even care about the actual battery itself. It just slows down regardless, just because of the age of the phone. So
yeah,
there you go.
And we just got a tweet from Jay Pasquales on using the PN Weekly hashtag. $79 for the battery replacement. $80. I mean,
$80.
That's a decent chunk of change, but if you wanted your phone to perform snappier, and that was the metric that Apple was using in terms of degrading performance, $80 is, I think, totally worth it to refresh an older phone, keep it running, get back to that higher tier of performance prior to the degradation.
If you even want to keep it beyond 2.5, 3 years. I mean,
well,
I know,
but we know that people do. That's what's so frustrating is the average ownership is somewhere around 26 or 28 months. I think the last time that we
don't have a dedicated table of reasons of why they do it. Maybe it's because of necessity or because they just feel comfortable with it. But in terms of all that, the experience that they allow themselves to have, well, not allow themselves to have, but just being empowered with a little more information, that would be altogether much better. I agree with that, Juan. So
definitely.
Let's move on to what we're talking about here. With more power comes more responsibility, comes more higher numbers. Snapdragon 845. These numbers mean not much to me because they're benchmarks. But I mean, what do you make of it? Because you wanted to talk about this, didn't you?
Oh, no, I definitely wanted to include it in the news roundup. So we're looking at the numbers on the Snapdragon 845. And I think we're seeing sort of what we would expect from another major processor release, depending on what phones we're comparing against, somewhere around a 20 to 30% improvement in these synthetic benchmarks, which in real world performance is probably going to translate to very little. But knowing what we know, especially from the coverage that Jaime was producing down in Hawaii for that Qualcomm event, this is going hand in hand. This sort of piggybacks on the story that we were talking about with Apple and batteries, is looking at Qualcomm's influence over the Android market and knowing that the next generation of services are going to be even more CPU intensive, even more graphics intensive. We're going to be looking at a lot of offloading of special services to independent cores as opposed to just general CPU computing. And this is where the A45 really comes into play. That 20 to 30% performance bump doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be seeing significantly better real world performance. Like your Twitter app is going to load a fraction of a millisecond faster than it used to. Instead, it's this horsepower will eventually be dedicated to services that will really tax current hardware. If you caught, someone posted just the screenshot of the performance, the what was it, Geekbench, the Geekbench scores on Reddit.
Yeah, the Geekbench.
And the comments there were hilarious because, of course, it instantly had to become an Apple versus Qualcomm debate.
Oh my God, the A10X Fusion makes total bull crap out of the MacBook Air and something.
And again, we should always treat synthetic benchmarks for exactly what they are. It's a synthetic process. It doesn't reflect real world performance. It's not a one-to-one, especially with how phones will alter their performance when they detect a benchmark being run. But
we
it was
say
just
that this could be also it's unverified of too. So like this could not be the thing that it purports to be.
I feel pretty confident that this is in line with what we'll see, especially Sony getting ahead of the curve. We know they're going to be trying to make some bigger changes in 2018 off the last generation of this boxy XZ or Xperia X form factor. I feel like reflective of what will come to pass. But again, it's always that hilarious debate or that hilarious nerd fight that we see in those kinds of posts where people are just at each other's throats. And I think, again, sort of missing the bigger picture, just the number of people like, oh, like I care about having slightly faster email performance. And you're like, well, that's not what this is about. And if you don't use your phone for anything other than email, why are you posting on our Android about a top of the line chipset when like a Snapdragon 614 from 3 years ago would be fine for you?
Because I am on the internet and I have opinion.
And someone else is on the internet and they're wrong.
I mean, I'm not going to contest that.
I know we didn't highlight it in the news block, but I just wanted to circle back real quick. Jules, what were your thoughts on this Magic Leap announcement that they're going to be getting into the actual hardware game with a pair of goggles? I thought this was an interesting time for them to take the wraps off what these things look like.
I'm not sure myself, because first of all, this is tailored towards creators, so there you go. It's the first look, it's a first feel about how they will come out, but functional enough. It doesn't, you don't have to look like you're fashionable like Jordy. The Vive, the Rifts, they all have pretty man designs. So I mean, well, until we get like actual mesh form replacement kind of visors that can adhere to your face, and then you can still have you won't be weird with your eyes like being covered up. It'll just show your eyes and whatnot.
Right.
Like until we get to that in like 3027. Like until then, I'm not really sure what the big deal is.
I'll be curious to see, because Magic Leap made a whole bunch of noise. They had that control interface where you moved your hands around and you could like interact with things on the screen. They were always showing off like Fruit Ninja and stuff like that. I'll be curious to see if this was the right time. No one really seems to benefit from being first with any kind of new consumer-facing technology. And I know that they're saying that this is going to be more for developers and for creators and for that kind of audience. But this is another example, like why I've been frustrated with Microsoft. Microsoft has sort of been like their lead in this market, showing off HoloLens and how cool HoloLens was. Now that lead is eroding quickly as phones are adopting more AR aspects, and developers are really interested in AR Core and AR Kit. And now we've got companies putting out hardware, and where is the big player response? Where is that Vive response or that Microsoft response? Mixed reality is really just VR plus. It's not really AR or piggybacking off of HoloLens in the way that we wanted to see real interaction with real world elements. I mean, so I just thought it was kind of curious that
again, it's
that a smaller company like Magic Leap, I think, is trying to make the play, make the headlines, get people interested in that, even though it's still a ways off from actually shipping. But this also seems to reflect just how empty the competition for AR has been, since the company that's most responsible for getting people interested in it, Microsoft, has been super quiet on that front since I think the Surface Book, what was it, the Surface Book launch, where they showed off that really cool AR game and you had like a shield and bugs would crawl out of the walls and stuff. Like, no one's really followed up since then.
I mean, it all depends on what the SDK allows you to do and just being able to interact with. I mean, you have a dedicated technology for detection of objects and what they're doing. You would hope that processing power, you'd be able to have non-body mounted peripherals so that you can actually play around with other things in the room and just have it look awesome and cool. I mean, I would love to play Rocket League in real life. How about that?
Yeah,
Let's do that.
I mean, and not just, like have a demolition derby, but,
okay.
to make it real. I definitely, I don't know how much time we need to spend on this AT&T
not really.
story,
not really.
But one of the things that again drives me nuts about this kind of thing is we're talking about a company that I think pulled in 14 billion over 2017, and it's these tax breaks which are allowing AT&T to deliver bonuses. But we also just caught news this morning that after the bonuses go out, they're going to be looking to lay off hundreds of people. Yeah, so all of these stories sort of mash up in a really obnoxious way. Without me getting too soapboxy about politics, like the real world
I mean, a
impact
lot
of
of them
these.
would get, yeah, a lot of them
Yeah.
would get the holiday bonus anyways. I'm not sure if it were to be like $1,000, but anyways, and this is not really a meaningful wage increase, so there's that, and just a whole lot of metrics, a lot of tap dancing, and not enough, substance.
Yeah, if we're talking about these companies getting these funds and improving and increasing their profits, I think a lot of us would be hoping to see more investment in their networks and their infrastructures, really building this out and keeping, talented people employed, as opposed to playing shenanigans with cash coming in. But I don't run a multi-billion-dollar
You
organization,
got to
so.
get that 5G evolution network up and running. Like,
Well,
this
the
is going to be
official spec
amazing
apparently
for
is here for 2019.
5G right there in your future.
Now, definitely want to touch on this one because we loves our YouTube live streaming capabilities.
So if you don't see us coming on to Amazon Tube, Amazon Hangouts,
OpenTube or whatever they're calling it.
Tubin on OpenTube.
No,
That's
yeah, I
what
mean,
we're going to do.
I think this could be a smart play because we've already seen Amazon. Well, Amazon bought out Twitch, so they already own one of the web's most popular streaming services. If they could leverage their market stance and their affiliate program for advertising on user-generated content, this could be the best case scenario for competition against YouTube. But again, it's still the ongoing battle of Amazon versus Google. Like the two biggest data user information trafficking websites on the internet going head to head. And the third place competition, the outside competition to the service would be Facebook. So again, like consumers just being the ping pong balls in a three-way battle of giant mega corporations.
There's just a
That
whole
all
lot of
profit in our
pettiness,
info.
though. It's just petty, stupid bull. Like, you're really going to snout something that is all about, oh, hey, we're going to distribute Amazon Prime Video in our original content, but we're not going to give it to Google. And Google's like, oh, we're not going to do YouTube then, and we're doing our original content, which isn't really the basis of what we were founded on. But you know what, whatever, this is business, and we like to pretend that this means something to consumers anyway. So yeah, it's
And
it's not,
yet,
it
I
does.
mean, and it's the conflict of also hoping, like, I would like to see some better competition for YouTube. It makes me cranky and nervous when that competition is coming from Amazon and Facebook. But until something arises where Google actually has to develop and support and better iterate for their content creators on YouTube, then I guess the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I don't know. I mean, it's not going to come from an outlet like Vimeo. We saw numerous other experiments shut down this year. Some that Pocketnow was even trying to play along with in terms of monetizing user-generated video. But it is an interesting place that we find ourselves in going into 2018, that we could be hoping for an Amazon competitor here solely because of the shenanigans that are being played at the top level with their subscriber bases.
Well, speaking of shenanigans, you want to talk about Google playing around with its money-making big star freaking web browser, and how they're just not. It's just a middle finger, I would say.
It was unnecessary. It was a waste of developer space.
And there wasn't
Anyone
even
who
like spoofing going on for Google Chrome on the
no
Windows Store.
not cool, Google. I have actually
No.
stopped using Google Chrome as my primary browser. I did a while back, and I went back to Firefox, and I've been fairly happy with Firefox. The new Quantum update was really clean, and then Firefox went and screwed it up by side loading some stupid add-on for Mr. Robot as part of like an AR game that no one asked for. But
Because they have to be cute that way.
yeah, those kinds of moves really sour, I think, a lot of people on trying to shift ecosystems. But I've still been rocking the Firefox, and the most recent updates to Chrome have not instilled me with a lot of confidence. So instead of wasting people's time by engaging in these kinds of shenanigans and putting up an app which is not an app on the Microsoft Store, maybe Google could just make their browser better. Maybe put time and effort and energy towards that, and really, rolling out improvements to things like Android app support for Chrome OS and eventually into Chrome browsers. And you could have like a really great Trojan horse for Microsoft products, allowing people to run Android apps through their Chrome browsers. But instead, why not just throw up a giant middle finger to Microsoft? Because I know if Microsoft were to do the exact same thing, everyone would totally be fine with Microsoft.
I mean, that's against their app strategy right now. They have
Android
Skype,
strategy.
they have all the Office and everything. So that's going out there. I mean, and there's also the potential for Google to compete back in the connected laptop space with the rumors of a Snapdragon 845 being worked into the repository for Chromium right now. So this is, I mean, they didn't have to rub this in, I guess.
Yeah. We have a couple tweets here, just circling back to a couple stories. This is from Andrew Wallace at Fat Produce. Hashtag PN Weekly. With Apple admitting to slowing its phone, how much do you want to bet that Android manufacturers are doing the same things? And I don't know that I'd be terribly surprised if there weren't some investigation into how bogged down Android devices get. I think one of the dangers is if it's true, that's bad. If it's not true, then
it's
Android
worse
is just
because
terrible.
I know, I know this is just going to. I mean, they're going to crash over time. You realize that, yeah, this is bound to happen when nothing gets done about it. So I would already put a solid no to the whole throttling of performance for
it
Android.
seems that like when you have a ton of custom software running on top of Android, which is a skin for the Linux kernel, or a container for the Linux kernel. I forget exactly what the word is that I'm trying to find there. It's vacation brain. It's bad either way, because either your phone is slowing down by design or it's slowing down because it's poorly built and poorly supported.
It's slowing down. Just
and this is also from Peter Hayton. Yes, Amazon could create some competition here, but given the natural low adoption rate it will likely have in the beginning, I would ask how many will actually move. I'm thinking of you at Pocketnow. Surely you could spread, but only if it's worthwhile to try, ? Hashtag PN Weekly. And I would actually be willing to take the jump, especially knowing how well Twitch works as a service for people who stream games. Low adoption rate wouldn't necessarily bother me. It would be about what platform offers us the best resources for producing the highest quality show that we can. And we went through some real problems, and we're still facing some little gremlins in how we broadcast on YouTube. Even if the adoption weren't the highest initially, I'd still be willing to take the experiment if it meant that we could give you guys a higher quality show.
Yeah. I'm not sure if we're not mentoring them just because it's under some non-disclosure or anything, but I mean, we have tried, and I think we're going to continue to try. I mean, most of our income does work out of Google in terms of the whole video sort of thing, but it's just there's
I mean, the thing is,
real.
it's not to step on, like, whenever we've posted videos directly to Twitter and directly to Facebook, and the monetization just doesn't work out for our main coverage. But this video feed has always existed as a way to interact in real time. and then we produce a higher quality audio version of the broadcast for people to use to consume through their favorite podcast catchers. I'm less married to YouTube for this podcast. If it can live somewhere else and it gives us better capabilities, then I'd be fine making the jump. Obviously, we wouldn't just jump ship from YouTube for our main device coverage. That would require something meatier, or also just, we'd probably just double dip, so videos will be uploaded to YouTube and to OpenTube. That I think would make sense in terms of future distribution, but we'd have to take a look at the numbers on that.
Yeah, so lots of plotting, lots of planning. There's always the hope that something better comes along and that we take advantage of it. But in the meantime, you can see full details on these stories and more at pocketnow.com, and look for the podcast section to get to this episode's rundown. You can chat with us about what you have been reading up on with hashtag PN Weekly. Also, be sure to catch and the Pocket Now Daily on our YouTube channel.
Yes. And at this point, we should probably take a quick minute to thank our sponsor. Support for today's show comes from Backblaze. Backblaze offers unlimited cloud backups for Macs and PCs for just $5 a month. Backup documents, music, photos, videos, drawings, projects, everything. You can access all your data anywhere in the world on the web or via your phone. And better yet, you can restore just one file or all of your files. The choice is yours. Plus, if you have a complete system failure, you can purchase a hard drive with all of your data on it and have it overnighted via FedEx. That's actually a pretty stinking cool service that I personally wished my current cloud solutions would offer. So then you return the drive, you'll get a full refund on that hardware. It's a win-win. That's pretty stinking great. Over 20 billion files restored. That's a lot of returned documents and memories. Best of all, Backblaze is gimmick-free. No additional charges, just $5 a month for full backups. I'm a big fan of redundancy. I think you should have some sort of local strategy, some sort of offsite strategy, and some kind of cloud strategy. So Backblaze might be the right fit for you. Make sure you visit backblaze.com/pocket now so they know where you came from. You can continue to support this show and receive a fully featured 15-day free trial at backblaze.com/pocket now. Dip your toe into the water, see if you like the service, see if you like their setup, and it's no cost to you to get started. Go there, play with it, start protecting yourself from potential bad times. Start today, backblaze.com/pocket now, and we thank them for supporting the Pocket Now Weekly.
Yes, indeed we do. Now, let's get into our next segment here. It's one that our former host and current friend of the show, Michael Fisher, wanted to put in for a long time, since episode 100, but he never had the chance to.
And we finally did it
into this
2 years after he stopped being on the show.
Pretty much, yeah. So let's give some background here. So the story goes this week that Apple's now requiring game publishers for its App Store to disclose the odds of getting items within them that are what are called loot boxes, where users make an in-app purchase, take the luck of the draw, and get one item out of a possible few that vary in rarity, ability, whatever the heck just helps the player. So there's been fresh controversy on these loot boxes. If you have not been aware, EA withdrew its microtransaction economy for Star Wars, where loot boxes could have been and were used as a means to fast forward through hours of potential grinding through the story. It was just a bad look overall. But where it gets relevant here is that our own Juan Carlos Bagnell has a very enthusiastic viewpoint on loot boxes as a means of gambling and whether it should be regulated as such. Now, I don't have a particularly strong attachment to playing games. I don't know how to hold a controller. So
yeah, and actually you got like huge hands. So every time we've given you one, it just sort of like snaps in half, and then no one else can play.
That's something that I'm ashamed to admit. I figured that if we're going to do a segment, though,
I really think you should get it looked at.
Yeah,
no, that's not where we're going with
plantar fasciitis. If we're going to do a segment on one of Juan's passion points, we might as well format it into something pretty. And we're calling this segment "Defend Yourself."
On with it. Yes, get on
Yes,
with it.
get on with it. All right. So put simply, it's just a debate format. It's nothing fancy. We have 60 seconds each for an opening statement, up segments lasting 30 seconds each. It'll be a rebuttal, cross-examination, and then closing remarks. Otherwise, this segment would be 20 minutes and we'd be going over the same point. You don't want that. You don't want to listen to that, do you?
No one wants that.
No, exactly. So I'm going to let Juan start off. I got the timer here ready, and I shall begin whenever you're ready. So your time starts now.
So, initial research into these types of mechanics does demonstrate that it really has little effect whether or not real world money is being received, but that the brain responds the same way to these slot machine style plays. There's this huge dopamine release, and it's a very aggressive way to restrict player involvement. So my problem isn't necessarily with microtransactions. I think this is the weaponization of taking microtransactions to the next level. It's that real world currency is not being applied to getting a thing. It's a rolling slot machine mechanic that can be changed on the fly behind the scenes. So it's not that this percentage stays the same. If you're a whale, they can juice up your winnings or restrict your winnings to keep you playing more. And so this type of disclosure is mandatory because what I ultimately do not want to have happen is law enforcement to get involved. No entertainment industry wins when laws are written about this. The industry needs to police itself.
All right. So that's his opening statement on that. And I guess I'll try and see if I can get mine within a minute.
I have a timer up. I just don't have fancy sound effects for you. So
Oh, well, I can set it at the same time. So I'm going to pretend that this starts right now. So in terms of just being able to talk about the whole microtransactions as a dopamine release, I don't really see that because gambling, it's just a set standard of terms. If we were to regulate this as something more of a mental health issue, that would be something else, and it would take a dramatic kind of all around approach to dealing with it, from healthcare necessities and all that. In regards to the actual gambling itself, where you're receiving either material goods or money as a result of putting in money for a game of chance, I really don't see the point to it. There is, I mean, you can do as well as putting in the odds and making sure that the process is as transparent as possible. But in terms of that, I mean, unless you're, I don't even think that a tournament would count because you're not, there's no real entry fee and there'd be rules for that. So there you go. Boom. All right. So with those opening statements out of the way, I'm going to try and see if I can work a rebuttal into this. I think I worked in. I think. I think I already rebutted a little bit of your statement there, but I'm going to try.
That was sort of a response. So do we want to do another round on this? Is that how you want to structure this?
Yeah, just another 30 seconds of. Well, you know what? We can just go into the cross examination part.
Okay.
And go straight through. I mean, we'll try. We're just playing this by ear. So 30 seconds on the clock, and it starts now. So if we really want to dedicate a whole government, a bill to this and make sure that how much money are we willing as public to spend on gamblers, on so-called gamblers? I'm going to say, I'm still going to insist on that. Why would it?
Oh, sorry. Am I responding to that? Is that the question?
Oh no, I was just going to ask just a couple of questions, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, my major point is we shouldn't be. I don't want to see unlicensed gambling in any video game. No gamer really likes these mechanics. We just deal with them because that's what's been built into these games, and that we're starting to see them arrive in AAA titles. So you're already spending $60 for the game, then you're spending real world money for in-game currency for a chance of unlocking a piece of a player mechanic, which is going to improve your gameplay. Nobody wants that. And especially from our conversation with Dr. Timothy Fong at UCLA, when we talked about smartphone addiction, the outcome doesn't necessarily matter. We're seeing the same patterns of behavior regardless of what you feed into and get out of the machine, as if you were just playing the slots at Vegas. So because of that, because of the actual brain mechanics that I think we're focused on here, and because of the fact that nobody wants this, we might as well find other ways of monetizing, additional monetizing games, other microtransactions that these companies can continue to profit off of. Leave this one alone, and especially keep it out of family-friendly franchises. I don't want my kids introduced to this style of gambling mechanic while playing a game focused on Disney characters, Marvel characters, Star Wars characters. That's just particularly insidious to halt little kid player progress through these types of gotcha workings. And I think we would all just be happier if they were excised because game developers cut them out, because then we wouldn't have to get law enforcement involved. We wouldn't have to get legislators involved. We don't want that. That's why we have movie ratings. That's why we have game ratings, explicit lyrics warnings. It's because those industries police themselves.
So if those industries police themselves, I'm wondering what's preventing the game industry from doing that to itself. It's because
it's too profitable.
But it's also, they also have something to lose. They realize that EA realized that with this move, but it's not preventing the rest of the industry. They have different targets too, from teenagers that are kind of bordering on the independence level, but still might tend to go for the parents' credit card or something like that. I'm wondering what's stopping the rest of the industry from more MMOs and whatnot.
No, I mean, after a point, what happens in a boardroom when you're getting an inside peek as to the companies that are actually producing and distributing these games is it doesn't matter if the game's profitable. It matters how profitable the game is. So if you introduce a gambling mechanic in one game and you see the percentage by which the profits increase by that mechanic, then technically you are losing money on future games if you don't also incorporate that mechanic. It starts to be discussed as if it's a loss for the company, even if the game sales are still wildly profitable. So it just becomes this lobster pot effect for the entire industry, where more developers and more distributors are looking at how they can incorporate these because they don't want to be seen as losing money for their shareholders by not using them. And that's what, again, this is why this has become so insidious, is we've seen this escalation of microtransaction policy and microtransaction adoption. I'm actually not overly upset by microtransactions. If you want to buy a bacon wrapped gun with real money for Call of Duty, go and buy it. To a point, I'm not particularly bothered by shortcutting on grind. What I'm mostly upset about is real world money being put towards a game of chance to potentially unlock game breaking or game improving mechanics for certain players. Because that right there, that for me is a bridge too far for this type of incorporation. I think it's predatory on the industry, and we've already seen legislators start to get involved in the game industry. It's I believe it's Chris Lee out of Hawaii is actually doing a really crazy cool YouTube series on what it takes to introduce a piece of legislation, and he's focused on gambling in video games. So we already see this is going to start popping up at the state and the federal level. It's only to game developers' credit to get rid of this mechanic now and then play ball with companies like Apple so that you are disclosing whenever there is a chance element in one of your games, that's properly disclosed to consumers.
Well, that's interesting. So, what I perceived before this argument was that you were in favor of regulation, whereas I was against it. But it turns out that the different topic here, the subset of the mechanics going in here, I find myself in favor of actual legislation where you're hoping for regulation. So, I guess that's my position.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the tricky.
So ask me a couple questions.
No, I think we can probably cut to a conclusion here, especially in the way that we've both sort of flipped on this issue. Is if the game industry can't police themselves, then like your point now, something needs to happen to prevent this type of mechanic from really growing roots in our video games. It's already a major component of more Asian centric games. That's, we call them like gotcha mechanics.
Yeah.
We want to put a stop to this. If the game developers won't do it themselves, then I agree with you, Jules. I think someone else needs to step in. Now, where I'm concerned and where I think a lot of our audience is going to agree with this as a sentiment is
breadth, it's details.
Well, government involvement in any piece or creation of media has never been to the benefit of that medium. We saw that with the film industry, where there was policing of morality in what could be filmed. We saw that with the music industry, especially during the Tipper Gore era of the music debate, before explicit warnings were put on albums. We saw that with the comic book industry and the comic code as a response to government oversight and censorship of our media. Every single time we've seen this happen, it's been bad for that industry. But if the industry can't police itself, then I think something else needs to step in. I think another entity needs to step in.
Well, it depends on the government. For example, in UK, there's a reason why they have the watershed and why they tend to, be a little bit more loose with their profanity.
Well, you're absolutely right. It does depend on the government, but we're talking about our government. This is why we have the FPAA and the RIAA and the entities that we do, is because we haven't seen. I'm not an anti-government guy. I think people understand I'm pretty left-leaning, and I'm about a social democrat.
To be fair, a lot of these assets that games come from are coming out of Hollywood, and they have their own regulations for that. But if these regulations start piling on the US, and we find that game publishers find that to be too overbearing, they might move over to somewhere where it's less like London, or maybe even like a tax island shelter for this kind of situation.
Yeah, but I think the problem is you can make a movie in the UK and not have it rated for the United States, and then your movie will just never be shown in a movie theater in the United States. You can release an album with explicit lyrics and not have it rated by the agencies, and just not have it ever sold in the United States or listened to through any medium in the United States.
The only real thing that's stopping
game somewhere else,
it's the App Store, it's the Play Store
that sold or distributed for any.
That's what they want to do. And if they're not passing along, if they're not passing along apps, then they're going to have a ecosystem that's deprived of. It's to this spec and to that spec. So it's really just about having the content there for these app ecosystems, rather than EA doing something that pisses off the US government for some reason.
Well, but it's more than just EA pissing off the US government. EA has backed off of this loot box mechanic, but they didn't actually fix the grind in the game significantly. There's still a lot of player grind that has to happen. In my own favorite mobile game, what I use to sort of benchmark graphics in all of our phone reviews is Marvel Future Fight, which also introduced new characters that relied on this sort of gambling mechanic. And I sort of had to have a mini freak out about that too, because I find, again, I say that's a bridge too far, especially for a franchise that I should be able to share with my kids and not have to worry about what's halting their player progress through real world currency mechanics.
Well, if we're talking about grind as part of the game, I think that's it's part of the same beast, but it's a separate enough issue for our purposes here to, I agree with you. Grind should never be part.
Especially when it's artificially applied to preventing player progress. So, the EA thing was so frustrating because it was, what was it? To unlock everything in the game was going to be something ridiculous, like over 2,000 hours of play. There's not 2,000 hours of game content, but you would have
2,000 hours of play.
2,000 hours of play and very repetitive content. So we see this mechanic dropped by EA for a Disney-owned franchise. We see this mechanic in several Disney properties, like Disney Emoji Blitz has very random elements in how you can move forward in that game. And we see this in a Disney franchise for a mobile game in Marvel Future Fight. So Disney is complicit, and Disney is okay with gambling mechanics being utilized in their games. They won't produce a rated R film, but they're fine with introducing your kids to gambling.
So, yeah, this is all about the speed runs, people. And if you get the top speed run, you get $5,000. So, good luck to y'all, and we'll see you later. Let's move into our segment here that you've been playing around with. So, it's been when it comes to these collaborative pieces that we do here at Pocketnow, we put it on the website pocketnow.com if you didn't know, and it's always fun trying to wrangle the responses together here, but I feel like this one came up pretty good. So if you're not familiar with the Secret Santa, what that is, basically we all get assigned a partner to give to. We just figure out, okay, what do we want to give? In this case, it has to be a smartphone, so there's that. And this is I frame this as a test of how well we at Pocketnow really know each other as just people. So, do you want to start off with your kind of deal here? Assigned Tony, our editor-in-chief, to give you something, and he chose Peer View. What do you think?
Well, yeah. So I was actually really happy that you set this up, because this was just sort of a fun little diversion to the end of the year videos and content that we've been producing, and just the idea, like if you could give another editor on the team any device, what would it be? And so Tony had me, our editor in chief, and he sent over a PureView 808. I mean, not really, but just for the
if we could,
the what ifism of if you could have any phone. And he nailed it. As someone who has spent a ton of time, I actually am revisiting my Lumia 1020. I'm going to be doing just some light shooting over the weekend after Christmas, and it was just it's such an amazing phone to revisit. But I never got to spend a lot of time with the Symbian, the forerunner to this, the PureView 808. So, I mean, it was totally the right fit. It was the perfect response to where I've been for phones. And it was just kind of funny that you assigned Adam Lane to me, who's like the legit, real professional photographer on our team. And the first thing I thought of was like, I would love to see what Adam could do with the Panasonic CM1. That unholy abomination of Panasonic camera stapled to some cheap facsimile of an Android phone. But I thought it was like, if anyone could get something cool out of this, it would be Adam Lane. So I that's what I ultimately gifted him.
I mean, that would be the most, like, of all the bullet point of features, they would be, oh, and it's a phone. Like, you would have to go all the way down for that. But I mean, he loves it. He loves RAW. He loves the manual controls and the focus or aperture or whatever the heck the wheel can do. You can set it to do whatever around the lens. And then there's a full 1-inch sensor, which he's impressed with. He notes that the Lumia 1020 has a 2/3 inch sensor. So
the only sensor on an Android, on any sort of mobile operating system device, that was bigger than the 1020.
It's kind of crazy. This is getting into Sony RX 100 territory right there.
I mean, we've been seeing patents, especially on newer devices, potentially going back to smaller, like 1/3 inch sensors. Like the LG V30 actually has a sensor shrink, but they're making up for it with a better lens element. But I still am holding out hope for that company that's going to come with another giant sensor experiment like the 1020.
I covered this last year, and I didn't remember it having a variable aperture. Where did it go to?
For the CM1?
Yeah, for the CM1.
I don't know that it really had much of a release outside of Asian markets. Like, if it
I mean the variable aperture, because
that I don't know. I mean, I haven't really spent any time with one. I always wanted to. Panasonic never returned any of my emails or phone.
What a shame. We're gonna go to CES and we're gonna bother them at their booth.
I might, especially because I switched over to the Micro Four Thirds world for producing my coverage, and I am actually shooting on a Panasonic now. Much to my chagrin, over like, well, fine, I don't want to talk about any of your phones. You're dumb. And then I ended up just go ahead and buying their cameras. So
Yeah. And he tends to take a lot of model fashion photography.
Yeah.
So he would want a better flash in that. He didn't get a xenon on the CM1, so he's gonna get a standalone nitro torch for that. So I mean, you pretty much got him almost all the way there. As for me, who did I give to? I gave to my fellow news editor Adrian Diaconescu, which I never really get to talk to him. I don't know what he's like in real life, but
Mhm.
I just assume that he's pretty straightforward, no nonsense kind of dude, and he always tends to have a bias towards the muscle cars and the muscle phones. So I just gave him a OnePlus 5T. He seemed to be pretty happy with it. He said that his 5X he got on a discount, and survived a couple of boot loop episodes with that. So good
I
for
think this
him.
is also why he's so snarky about Android on the posts that he writes. Is
Just a
I
little
would
bit
be too if
bitter.
I'd gone through a Nexus 5X boot looping.
Too bad the class action doesn't include Romania, because
Nope.
hey. Well, there's that. So I got him pretty close to the mark there. By the way, he decided to gift Jaime a BlackBerry Key 1, and the reason why
Mhm.
I want to mention that is because let me try and see if I could find the passage, because this is really going to, industrious as he is. The BlackBerry Key 1, it's also not extremely expensive. So if we were to do this thing for real, I'd have a chance to get a pricier, better overall package from my Secret Santa gift giver and make a little profit. After all, it's the gesture that counts, right? So he didn't realize. I sent him the OnePlus 5T after he sent out his gift, so he didn't have the chance to realize that if he got a Key 1 now, which is like $450,
Right.
between the 5Ts, lower and higher tiers, he could be making $50 to $100 if he sold his
Totally.
5Ts. So
You
it
gotta
just
get him to flip
happened.
those phones at the right time.
Exactly. Phone flippers, that new on HGTV.
Yeah.
Uh, and we
It's
go
like a
on
show
to
literally tens of people might watch.
1.5 million people, I would assume. We could host it on Pocketnow's channel. That would be cool. I'd
Totally.
say actually Jaime, I assigned Jaime to give me a little thing. I own him a cardigan sweater. I don't know where that went, because it's a long story. I'd say Jules is the king of candid photography. It leads me to believe that if there's anything he'd care about most is the camera on the phone. Candid photos require a product that can deliver with every shot, involve much playing around with. And he can and the Google. I'm running this show off of a Pixel 2.
Mhm.
So two Pixel 2s for me, that would be great. I'd appreciate that. Thank you,
So
Jaime.
I
But
mean, think about like what you could do candid shooting like with a phone in each hand. Just like twice the candids, 2 times the jewels.
we should 3D photography, candid photography in 3D should be
I
thing again.
I'd be on board. I'd check that out definitely.
So I mean, just for contrarian sake, maybe I would appreciate the iPhone 10, just to go around
Have
play
you
with
spent? Have you?
iOS.
Because I know we don't. You typically don't get the same like wealth of phones that Jaime gets. But have you spent any appreciable time with a recent version of the iPhone?
No, not really. I mean, I've played around in the carrier stores, and I've yet to touch an iPhone 10. So, but recent Twitter talk from I think it was Dieter, no, it was Dan Seifert, and he was just like trashing the cellular reception during
Oh,
his
I mean, I
game,
know we were
because
covering some of those stories about radio management and stuff. I just mean like I think right now Jaime has the iPhone 8, the 8 Plus, and the 10. It would be worth maybe sending you the iPhone 8 for a week just to see how you feel about it. what a modern iPhone feels like. It was an interesting experience covering the 8 Plus this year.
Well, I'd be down to go for it, especially because of the photos that I take. Let's see, well, what have I taken recently? Lots of subway pictures.
Well, I've seen a few of those are really sharp coming from the Pixel. I've been very impressed.
A few of them, but I'm kind of just more of a people carving up their knives in a ramen restaurant.
Well, sure. I don't know what to yes and
oh, there's the headless Narav Gandia. Hey.
Well, but I would definitely recommend people checking out the story, just because, like I said, it's we don't often get to give you guys the BTS or like talk about ourselves. We're trying to stay more focused on actual news and editorial and stuff. So it was just sort of a nice way to round robin the editors and producers on the team to.
It's Christmas.
Yeah, it's Christmas. Well, and then also it's like in the dating game, like how well do you know your compatriots and what would you give to them? We do have a couple tweets here that I want to wrap up before we finish up the show.
Go to Peter's first, yeah.
Well, Peter has a couple, but I was gonna mention his. If this were down to me, I would definitely give a V30 to some gadget guy, no question. But I would stick a Mate 10 on the back. For Point Jules, I think I would get you a U11. It just seems to suit you, but I think you might like the design. I mean, no harm.
I mean, I have no objections to a U11. I personally want to carry a smaller phone these days, but the U11, very sleek. I suppose it has a pretty good camera too.
Yeah, I mean, like, I didn't have any issues with it.
Plus, just to get that 2x1 screen, but.
Well,
hey.
and you know, like I also know you're not opposed to the dongle life, so that wouldn't mess you up too much.
Well, dongle life or the Jabra life, the little thing I got. It's lovely.
Oh, right. Yeah, you've been rocking the neckband on that one too. I still have my LGs, so I'm still on LG.
Better than neck beard. I don't know.
I don't know. I was for a second there. I thought you said tech beard, and I was like, why would you diss Adam Dowd like that? Adam Dowd's a good dude. Oh, you said neck beard, not tech beard. Okay, I'll shut up. No, this one's a question I want to throw out there. We don't have to spend a whole lot of time talking about this, but
sure.
I'm going to butcher this name. Sakis Karathanasis asks, greetings from Greece. Hello to Greece. Your comments on the i7 Core Pixelbook price. When will other companies stop mimicking Apple's insane pricing policy? And I had to look it up because I remembered the launch of the Pixelbook. I didn't look up the i7. The Core i7 Pixelbook with 16 gig of RAM and 512 gigabytes of solid state.
Start at $1,000. That's right.
$1,549. That does not include the Pixelbook Pen, which is going to be another $100, and then preferred care on that would be $249. So the grand total for a fully outfitted Pixelbook Core i7 would be $1,897 if purchased today in the United States, which means it's probably even more stinking expensive in countries around the EU. $2,000, Jules. Does Chrome OS fit a $2,000 mobile computing lifestyle strategy?
I would make it fit. If I'm paying that much money, I would make it fit. Android apps, sure. I'll just load them all onto it, and yeah, I'll be hopefully not power washing them for like at least a couple of years. So
I almost spat Diet Root Beer at my Panasonic camera, which is running this podcast right now. I'm really torn on this because I really want to respect a premium tier for any device manufacturer. I was on board the Surface before people were like really getting on board the Surface train. Like the Surface 1, I was in there saying like, this is the right move from Microsoft. I wanted to see a manufacturer offer a compelling product at a premium tier, not just compete with Windows on price. Like you can buy a $2,000 MacBook or a $400 Dell. Like that's not the right way to always position your product. So I really appreciated Microsoft taking the lead. And it took until the Surface Pro 3 before I think that that idea took off with consumers. I have a hard time with the bang for buck ratio on a Chrome OS device nearing in on that $2,000 price point because it's just nice. It is really nice. It's gorgeous hardware. It's really well constructed. I don't know that that's enough to warrant what you can get out of the Chrome OS ecosystem right now. And so that as a recommendation becomes more difficult. I don't believe Chrome OS always needs to live on $200 plastic Chromebooks for kids. Like a grown-up option for Chrome OS totally makes sense. I don't know that I could say buy this though. I would have a hard time saying this is the right fit for you.
I mean, if it's easier, just Valve bring Steam onto Android officially. Just do that. Just
well, instead
like,
of what was it, Steam
that's
or Steam OS or whatever it was, just make a version that can run on Chrome OS, and you've got
Adobe bring all of your Android APKs, just make them specifically limited to Chrome OS or something. I don't know.
Well,
maybe Google should do that.
Oh, I've been reading through a lot of the people that are like hashtagging Mojo out there, mobile journalism, and that kind of on the ground, on the run, mobile production lifestyle idea. And there's a lot of it that I find very compelling. And I think apps are getting to that point where you can fulfill a lot of what you would need from more robust x86 applications through a mobile interface. I've produced videos on the road only on my phone, shooting all the video, recording the VO, cutting up, adding sound tracking and layering, compositing transitions and text all in 4K video and uploading it directly to YouTube from a smartphone. It's not as fast as what I can do on a laptop, but it's more than capable. So that kind of stuff, I'm not faulting Chrome OS here. It's just this, to me, if my phrase for this podcast is a bridge too far, $2,000 for Chrome OS just feels like a bridge too far. And I don't know. This is just a feeling. Like, it's my own personal bias as to what I think the value proposition is here. And I don't know that Google's reached it just by delivering nice hardware. You can get a lot of nice hardware for a more capable package.
You could just get a CNC case for like $50 and then just be happy with that. I mean,
well, but I mean, I'm looking at like my gaming laptop, and what I get out of that as an investment near that $2,000 price point is phenomenally more robust and capable, and I think it's just as nice. And I think it's, I'm not sacrificing anything in terms of screen resolution, having a touch screen, and I can play with both Windows appy apps and full legacy x86 desktop grade, workstation grade software. I don't have to compromise. And, I'm saving $100 by buying a Pixelbook for significantly less capability and in a shell that's probably, in my opinion, the aesthetic that I like for my lifestyle, not as nice as what I can get from my gaming laptop.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you can play Angry Birds on both things just pretty fine. It's no big deal.
Or I just run an Android emulator and still run all of my apps on my gaming.
Oh man, and Android Kit Kat emulators, because those things are
so gross. But I don't know that I've really answered your appeal to us discussing this Sakis. But I appreciate you sending in the tweet with the question there. I think it's about time we start wrapping this show up.
Indeed. So thank you everyone for making this show possible. And if you want to contact us, podcast@pocketnow.com. We have that mega mailbag episode coming up for next week. Yep.
And folks,
I'm sorry.
I thought you were going to say just one other thing. I was going to take one more swig of Diet Root Beer so I can burp on Mike. There you have it, folks. Another episode of the Pocketnow Weekly has come and gone. This show is over, but the conversation continues on Twitter, where Jules is @PointJules, and I'm humbly @SomeGadgetGuy. Pocketnow is around the web, various social media platforms, and our home site, pocketnow.com. Spanish speakers definitely check out es.pocketnow.com. We're basically everywhere. Shows like this cannot exist without your support. Sharing the weekly with your friends who love mobile technology and dropping reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you can review a podcast. Once again, we want to thank this week's sponsor, Backblaze. Hit that link, backblaze.com/pocketnow, to start backing up your computers. But ultimately, there wouldn't be a show if it weren't for our listeners and subscribers who have kept us on the air since 2012. The Pocketnow Weekly will be back next week with all kinds of delicious technology goodness, answering your email mailbag questions. So make sure you tune back in.